The holographic display cast an eerie blue glow across Marcus Cole's weathered face as he studied the contract details. 43 successful eliminations had earned him a reputation in certain circles, the kind where questions weren't asked, and identities remained shadows. 6 million credits, said the digitally distorted voice from the comm unit. Half now, half upon confirmation. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's triple my usual rate. The target isn't usual. The hologram shimmered, revealing the image of a female humanoid figure. Her skin had a subtle lavender hue that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Elongated eyes, vertical pupils, and delicate facial ridges confirmed what Marcus already suspected: this wasn't a human target. Princess Alara of the Veldari Empire, the voice continued. She'll be attending peace negotiations on Nalara in 3 weeks. That's your window. Marcus zoomed in on the image. Despite the alien features, there was something captivating about her face, a regal quality, certainly, but something more. Intelligence, perhaps. Why eliminate someone pushing for peace? Peace on Veldari terms is no peace at all. Their empire has consumed 12 systems in the past decade. This diplomatic mission is merely a stalling tactic while they position their fleet near the Arcturus settlement. We have intelligence suggesting the princess herself ordered the destruction of the Tau Ceti outpost. 3,000 human colonists had died when Tau Ceti went dark. The news networks had blamed it on a containment failure, but rumors had circulated about Veldari involvement. I don't typically take political assignments, Marcus said, though they both knew it was merely a negotiating position. This isn't politics. It's survival. Marcus stared at the princess's image, trying to see a killer behind those alien eyes. I'll need everything you have on Veldari physiology. And diplomatic credentials that will stand up to scrutiny. Already prepared. A data packet downloaded to his secure terminal. Dr. Tessa Rivera, our xenobiologist, will brief you tomorrow. The Veldari have certain biological differences that will affect your approach. Marcus nodded. He'd need to modify his weapons, study their vulnerabilities. What about extraction? Once confirmation is received, a diplomatic shuttle will be waiting. By the time they realize what's happened, you'll be halfway to the Centauri gateway. The comm went silent, leaving Marcus alone with the princess's hologram. He manipulated the image, studying her from different angles. The Veldari were new to human space, having emerged from a previously unknown region beyond the Perseus Void only 15 years ago. Their advanced technology and expansionist philosophy had made them both valuable trading partners and potential threats. Marcus downloaded the intelligence briefing and began to read. The princess was over 100 years old, young for her species. She'd recently risen to prominence in the imperial court, advocating for cooperative rather than competitive relationships with humans. Some saw this as a genuine push for peace, others, like his employers, viewed it as deception. He closed the file and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. 6 million credits would set him up for a comfortable retirement. One last job, even if it meant killing an alien princess. Marcus walked to the window of his high-rise apartment, looking out at the gleaming spires of New Singapore. Somewhere out there, beyond the light pollution and the atmosphere, past the orbital stations and defense platforms, was the Veldari Empire. And soon, he would be there, getting close enough to their princess to put a bullet through her alien heart. He just hoped those strange, captivating eyes wouldn't haunt him afterward. The diplomatic transport shuddered as it broke through Nalara's upper atmosphere. Marcus adjusted his formal attire, a charcoal suit with the subtle emblems of a mid-level human diplomatic attaché. His credentials identified him as Jonathan Reed, cultural liaison to the Interstellar Commerce Division. First time on Nalara? Asked an older diplomat seated across from him. Is it that obvious? Marcus forced a nervous smile, playing his role perfectly. The white knuckles gave you away. The man extended his hand. Ambassador Donovan. Relax, the Veldari might look intimidating, but they're sticklers for diplomatic protocol. No one's been executed for a cultural faux pas in, at least 3 months. Marcus laughed along with the others in the transport. Beneath his seat, hidden in a specially designed compartment that had bypassed security scans, lay the components of his custom weapon, a dart gun that would deliver a toxin specifically engineered for Veldari physiology. The transport descended toward the magnificent spires of Thalvarin, the ceremonial capital of Nalera. Crystalline towers caught the light of the twin suns, fracturing it into prismatic beams that danced across the cityscape. For a supposedly warlike species, the Veldari had undeniable aesthetic sensibilities. Impressive, Marcus murmured, genuinely awed. Wait until you see the Imperial Gardens, Donovan said. Rumor has it the princess personally tends to certain rare specimens. A peculiar hobby for their royalty. Marcus filed away this information. The gardens might provide an opportunity, isolated, yet accessible. The diplomatic compound was a blend of human and Veldari architecture, a physical symbol of the attempted cultural merger. Marcus was assigned quarters in the East Wing, conveniently positioned with access to both the main diplomatic halls and service corridors. He spent the first 2 days establishing his cover, attending minor functions, and mapping security protocols. On the third evening, he slipped away from a cultural exhibition to explore the outer perimeter of the royal palace. The Veldari guards were tall, muscular humanoids with the same lavender skin he'd seen in the princess's hologram. Their eyes glowed faintly in the twilight, an evolutionary adaptation to their homeworld's dim illumination. You appear lost, human. The voice came from behind him, melodic despite its hint of suspicion. Marcus turned to find a female Veldari in the formal attire of the royal court. Not a guard, but not someone he could ignore. Forgiveness, honored one, he said, using the appropriate Veldari greeting. I was admiring the architecture and wandered farther than intended. The Veldari studied him, her iridescent eyes narrowing slightly. The human fascination with our buildings is well documented. I am Lyria, handmaiden to Princess Alara. And you are? Jonathan Reed, cultural liaison. He bowed in the Veldari manner, from the waist, eyes downcast but not closed, a sign of respect without submission. Her posture relaxed marginally. You have studied our ways well, Jonathan Reed. Not well enough to avoid getting lost, apparently. A sound emerged from her that took him a moment to recognize as laughter. Perhaps you would benefit from a proper tour, rather than this unauthorized exploration. It was an unexpected opportunity. I would be honored. Over the next hour, Lyria guided him through parts of the palace grounds normally inaccessible to human diplomats. She spoke of the 1,000-year history of the royal line, of the artistic symbolism embedded in every architectural choice. Marcus listened attentively, building rapport while mentally noting security positions and patrol patterns. The princess has been most insistent that humans understand our culture, Lyria explained as they walked. She believes much of the tension between our peoples stems from mutual miscomprehension. Is that a widely held view among your people? Marcus asked. Lyria's expression darkened. Not all Veldari welcome the princess's progressive attitudes. The Imperial Command, in particular, sees humans as potential rivals rather than partners. And what do you believe? She stopped walking and turned to face him. I believe my princess sees what others do not. The path of conquest has limits, but the path of cooperation is boundless. Marcus was surprised by her candor. It contradicted the briefing he'd received, which had portrayed the princess as the public face of Veldari expansionism. As they approached the entrance to the Imperial Gardens, Lyria pointed to an ornate structure in the distance. Tomorrow night, the princess hosts the ceremony of celestial harmony. All diplomatic envoys are invited. Perhaps there, you might form your own impression. I look forward to it, Marcus replied, his mind already calculating angles of approach and escape routes. Later that night, lying in his quarters, Marcus assembled his weapon and considered what he'd learned. If the princess truly was a voice for peace, why were his employers so determined to eliminate her? What had really happened at Tau Ceti? The questions troubled him more than he cared to admit. 6 million credits, he reminded himself. One clean shot, then retirement. Politics wasn't his concern, never had been. But as he drifted toward sleep, it was Lyria's words that echoed in his mind, the path of conquest has limits, but the path of cooperation is boundless. Tomorrow he would meet his target face to face, and then he would know where the truth lay. The ceremony of celestial harmony transformed the grand hall of Thalvarin into a breathtaking display of light and sound. Crystalline chandeliers suspended from the vaulted ceiling refracted the glow of Nalera's twin moons, bathing the assembled dignitaries in a soft, ethereal radiance. Atmospheric harmonizers released subtle notes that resonated with the crystal, creating music that seemed to emanate from the air itself. Marcus navigated through clusters of human and Veldari officials, nodding politely while maintaining his unassuming diplomatic persona. His weapon was concealed in a modified ceremonial bracelet, an innocuous accessory for formal Veldari occasions. One twist of the outer ring would deploy a needle containing the neurotoxin. Fast, silent, and impossible to trace back to human origin. Jonathan Reed. Lyria appeared beside him, dressed in formal court attire that accentuated the elegant contours of her tall frame. I am pleased you accepted the invitation. I wouldn't miss it, Marcus replied. Though I confess, I understand little of the ceremony's significance. It commemorates the alignment of our worlds, she explained, guiding him toward a less crowded area near an arched window. When the orbits of Nalera and its sister planet Ilera create perfect harmony. Our ancestors believed this alignment opened pathways between souls. Marcus gazed out at the spectacle of the two moons, perfectly positioned in the night sky. It's beautiful, he said, genuinely moved despite himself. The princess will begin the ritual soon. It would be wise to. Lyria stopped mid-sentence, her attention drawn to the main entrance. A hush fell over the gathering as Princess Ilera entered the hall. Even prepared as he was, Marcus felt his breath catch. The hologram had not done her justice. Her skin possessed a luminescence that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, shifting through subtle hues of lavender and azure. Her eyes, larger and more expressive than those of her companions, held a depth that spoke of ancient wisdom despite her relative youth. Unlike the ornate attire of her court, the princess wore a simple gown of flowing silver, adorned only with a single crystal pendant that caught and amplified the moonlight. Breathtaking, isn't she? Lyria whispered. Marcus nodded, unable to form words. This was his target, the alien royal he'd spent weeks preparing to eliminate. Yet in this moment, all his clinical detachment evaporated. The princess moved through the crowd, stopping to exchange words with various dignitaries. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a musical quality that seemed to resonate with the crystalline harmonies filling the hall. She's coming this way, Lyria said, a note of pride in her voice. Remember to bow as I showed you. Marcus's hand drifted unconsciously toward his bracelet. The optimal moment would be during the greeting, close proximity, the expected physical contact of the Veldari welcome gesture. No one would notice until it was too late. 6 million credits, he reminded himself. The princess approached, her gaze meeting his with unexpected directness. Up close, he could see the subtle patterns etched into her skin, biological markers of her royal lineage. Your Highness, Lyria said, bowing deeply. May I present Jonathan Reed, cultural liaison from Earth. Marcus bowed as instructed, his mind calculating angles and timing. When he straightened, the princess extended her hand in the human manner, an unexpected concession to his supposed culture. Mr. Reed, she said, her voice rippling like water over stones. Your presence honors us. Marcus took her hand, feeling the strange warmth of her skin. His finger hovered over the activation mechanism of his bracelet. One slight movement. You have questions, the princess said, her head tilting slightly as she studied his face. I see them in your eyes. Ask, and I will answer if I can. The directness caught him off guard. I'm curious about your vision for human Veldari relations, Your Highness. Her expression softened. A future where our differences strengthen rather than divide us. Where we explore the stars as partners, not competitors. She gestured toward the twin moons visible through the window. Like Nalera and Ilera, separate bodies whose paths align in perfect harmony. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion erupted across the hall. A server, a young Veldari male, had dropped his tray and was moving with unnatural speed toward the princess, his hand reaching inside his uniform. Time slowed for Marcus. His assassin's instincts processed the scene instantly, the server's dilated pupils, the awkward bulge of a concealed weapon, the too direct approach that screamed amateur. Without conscious thought, Marcus released the princess's hand and pivoted, placing his body between her and the approaching threat. In one fluid motion, he intercepted the would-be assassin, gripping the young Veldari's wrist and forcing the crude plasma dagger away from its intended target. Security personnel swarmed forward, but not before Marcus had disarmed the attacker and forced him to the ground. The hall erupted in chaos, diplomats scrambling for exits, guards establishing a protective perimeter around the princess. Stand down, came a commanding voice. The princess herself approached, her expression concerned but composed. Release him to my guards. Marcus complied, stepping back as royal security took custody of the trembling assassin. Your reflexes are impressive for a cultural liaison, Princess Ilera said, studying Marcus with new intensity. Former military, he offered, the partial truth flowing easily. Old habits. The princess nodded slowly, but something in her gaze suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Whatever your past, you have my gratitude, Jonathan Reed. It seems the fates have aligned our paths in unexpected ways. As the princess was escorted away by her security detail, Marcus remained rooted in place, still processing what had just happened. He had come here to assassinate her, yet when another had attempted the same, he had instinctively protected her. Lyria appeared at his side, her expression a mixture of relief and suspicion. You move like a predator, Jonathan Reed, not a diplomat. We all contain multitudes, he replied softly. 6 million credits waited upon completion of his contract. But as Marcus watched the princess's retreating form, he knew with absolute certainty that he could not claim them. Not anymore. Something had changed in that moment of connection, something fundamental and irreversible. The royal palace was in lockdown following the assassination attempt. Guards patrolled every corridor, and enhanced security protocols meant Marcus couldn't move as freely as before. Yet, paradoxically, his heroic intervention had granted him unprecedented access to the princess's inner circle. The council requests your presence, Mr. Reed, announced a stern-faced Veldari guard outside Marcus's quarters the following morning. Marcus followed silently, his mind racing. Had his cover been compromised? Was this an elaborate trap? The guard led him through a series of secure checkpoints to a section of the palace he hadn't mapped in his reconnaissance. They entered a circular chamber with a translucent dome that revealed Nalera's violet sky. Around a crescent-shaped table sat 5 Veldari officials, their formal regalia indicating positions of significant authority. At the center, Princess Ilera watched him with those penetrating eyes. Jonathan Reed, she began as he bowed, though I suspect that may not be your actual name. Marcus maintained his composure, though his pulse quickened. Your Highness. Our security protocols include biometric scanning, she continued. Your diplomatic credentials are flawless, but your physical responses during last night's incident registered patterns consistent with specialized combat training. Far beyond standard military. An older Veldari male with weathered skin and a scar across his jaw leaned forward. You move like a hunter, human. Like someone trained to kill. Marcus weighed his options carefully. Maintaining his cover seemed pointless now, yet revealing everything would be suicide. I have certain skills from my past. Skills that proved useful last night. Indeed they did, the princess agreed. Which raises an interesting question: why would someone with your particular talents be embedded in a diplomatic mission? Before Marcus could formulate a response, the chamber door opened, and Lyria entered with a data tablet. The analysis is complete, Your Highness. The princess nodded. Show him. Lyria activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed footage from the Tau Ceti outpost, the very incident Marcus's employers had cited as evidence of Veldari aggression. But instead of showing Veldari ships attacking the human settlement, it clearly depicted a false flag operation. Human vessels with modified signatures launching the devastating assault. This was recovered from encrypted channels, the princess explained. The attack on Tau Ceti was carried out by a human military contractor called Helix Operations. They made it appear as though Veldari forces were responsible. Marcus stared at the evidence, recognition dawning. Helix Operations, the same organization that had hired him. The same people who wanted Princess Ilara dead. The humans responsible have powerful allies in your government, continued the scarred Veldari. They seek war because they profit from it. Peace would devastate their economic interests. We believe, Princess Ilara said, leaning forward, they have sent an assassin to eliminate me and ensure that war becomes inevitable. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to Marcus. He felt the weight of their suspicion, their silent accusation. In that moment, he made his choice. They did send an assassin, he admitted quietly. Me. Guards immediately moved toward him, weapons raised, but the princess raised her hand, stopping them. Yet you saved my life instead of taking it. Why? Marcus looked directly into her eyes. Because everything they told me was a lie. Because I saw something in you that didn't match their description of a warmonger. Because. He hesitated, struggling to articulate the profound shift in his perspective. Because some contracts shouldn't be fulfilled. The princess studied him for a long moment. What is your real name? Marcus Cole. Well, Marcus Cole, you now face a choice. Helix Operations will know you failed. They will send others. You can leave now, we will not stop you, and perhaps escape their retribution. Or you can help us expose their conspiracy and prevent the war they so desperately want. The scarred Veldari objected immediately. Your Highness, you cannot trust this human. He came here to murder you. Yet here I stand, Valerian, she countered. Alive because of his choice. She turned back to Marcus. What say you, assassin? Will you help us secure peace, or return to the shadows? Marcus thought of the 6 million credits he would never collect. Of the retirement that would never happen. Of the fact that Helix Operations would hunt him relentlessly once they discovered his betrayal. But he also thought of the thousands who would die in a manufactured war. Of the princess's vision for cooperation instead of conflict. Of the chance to finally use his skills for something beyond taking lives. I'll help you, he said finally. But you should know, they've already sent a second assassin. A contingency in case I failed. Alarm spread through the council members, but the princess remained calm. How do you know this? Standard protocol for high-value targets. I recognized the signs when reviewing the security feeds. Someone arrived on yesterday's diplomatic shuttle. Someone who's watching and waiting for the right moment. Can you identify this assassin? Marcus shook his head. Not yet. But I know how they think, how they operate. With your permission, I'll work with your security team to find them. Princess Ilara rose, her decision made. Valerian, assign Marcus Cole appropriate clearance. He will work directly with the Royal Guard. She approached Marcus, stopping just before him. If you betray this trust, no power in the galaxy will protect you from my wrath. Despite her smaller stature, the threat carried unmistakable weight. Marcus nodded his understanding. As the council dispersed, Lyria remained behind, her expression unreadable. You were going to kill her, she said once they were alone. Yes. Yet now you risk your life to protect her. Marcus looked toward the doorway where the princess had departed. Some people change everything just by existing. Lyria's features softened slightly. On that, human, we agree. She gestured toward the exit. Come. We have an assassin to catch, before time runs out for all of us. 3 days of heightened security had transformed the palace into a fortress. Marcus worked alongside Valerian and the Royal Guard, implementing counter-assassination protocols and reviewing every aspect of the upcoming peace summit. His insider knowledge of Helix operations methods had already uncovered and neutralized 2 potential threats. Yet the second assassin remained elusive. Nothing on the diplomatic shuttle manifest matches known Helix operatives, Lyria reported as she joined Marcus in the security hub. Screens displayed real-time surveillance of the palace grounds where delegates were gathering for the historic signing ceremony. They wouldn't use known operatives for this, Marcus replied, eyes scanning the crowd. They'd use someone new. Someone who could blend seamlessly. Princess Ilara entered the hub, her ceremonial attire shimmering under the artificial lights. The human delegation is growing impatient. Chancellor Reeves insists we proceed as scheduled. It's too dangerous, Marcus argued. We haven't located the assassin. Perhaps because there is no second assassin, suggested Valerian. Perhaps this is merely a delaying tactic from our newfound ally. The princess silenced him with a look. If Marcus believes there is danger, I trust his assessment. She turned back to the screens. However, we cannot delay. This treaty represents decades of diplomatic work. If we postpone, those who oppose peace will claim victory. Marcus understood the dilemma. The peace treaty would establish a joint governance framework for contested star systems, ending the resource conflicts that had brought both civilizations to the brink of war. It would also dismantle the military-industrial complex that Helix operations represented, billions in contracts, evaporated. Then we adapt, Marcus decided. Change the ceremony format. Minimize your exposure. The princess shook her head. The Veldari people must see me stand proudly alongside the human chancellor. Anything less sends the wrong message. Marcus studied her determined expression, admiring her courage even as he calculated the risk. Then let me stay close. Not as security, they'll be watching for that, but as part of your ceremonial retinue. Preparations moved swiftly after that. Marcus was fitted with traditional Veldari attendant garments, flowing robes that concealed both his human features and the compact weapon he insisted on carrying. The princess herself adjusted the ceremonial headpiece that would partially obscure his face. A strange destiny, she remarked quietly, that my life would come to depend on the man sent to end it. Stranger still, Marcus replied, that I would find something worth risking everything for. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended species and circumstance. For a brief moment, Marcus allowed himself to imagine a future beyond this day, beyond the constant shadow of death that had defined his existence. The moment shattered as Lyria burst into the chamber. We've identified suspicious communications from within the palace. Someone has been transmitting encrypted data to an orbital vessel matching Helix signatures. The source? Valerian demanded. Chancellor Reeves's personal aide, Veronica Ellis. Marcus froze. Ellis? Show me her image. The holographic display confirmed his worst fears. That's Nadia Volkov, Helix's top operative. I trained with her. He turned to the princess. We need to abort. Now. But it was too late. The ceremony had begun, diplomats already assembling on the grand pavilion visible through the palace windows. Chancellor Reeves stood at the center, Ellis/Volkov at his side. She won't just target the princess, Marcus realized. She'll eliminate both leaders, Human and Veldari, and ensure the treaty dies with them. Marcus moved with cold precision, outlining a counterplan as they hurried toward the ceremony. The princess would be surrounded by her guard, with Marcus hidden among them. Valerian would discreetly evacuate the Chancellor while Lyria coordinated with palace security to isolate Volkov. As they reached the ceremonial antechamber, Marcus caught the princess's arm. If anything happens to me, you need to know, there's evidence about Helix operations in a secure server. Access codes are encrypted on my personal transmitter. Nothing will happen to you, she insisted, her hand briefly touching his face. We will both see the peace we've fought for. The great doors opened, and the ceremony began. Marcus maintained his position 3 steps behind the princess as she glided toward the central platform where Chancellor Reeves waited. The assembled dignitaries applauded, unaware of the deadly game unfolding before them. Marcus scanned the crowd, tracking Volkov's movements as she shadowed the Chancellor. Her hand drifted toward her ceremonial sash, the likely location of her weapon. Everything happened in an instant. Volkov's eyes met Marcus's across the pavilion, recognition flashing between former colleagues. Her hand moved, drawing a concealed plasma disruptor. Marcus lunged forward, pushing the princess aside as energy blazed through the space she had occupied. Chaos erupted. Guards converged from all directions as Marcus rolled to his feet, drawing his own weapon. Volkov had already taken a second shot, striking a Veldari official who collapsed in a heap of ceremonial robes. Traitor, she snarled, changing targets to fire directly at Marcus. He dove behind a decorative column, then emerged firing with precision. His shot caught Volkov in the shoulder, spinning her around but not stopping her. She retreated toward the Chancellor, grabbing him as a shield. Stay back, she shouted to the advancing guards. Or your peaceful future dies here. Marcus circled cautiously, weapon raised. It's over, Nadia. Helix is exposed. We recovered the Tau Ceti footage. Her eyes widened slightly, the first sign of doubt. You've thrown away everything for these aliens, she spat. For what? Some misguided conscience? They'll eliminate us once they have what they want. You're wrong, Marcus replied. I've seen the truth. This war benefits no one but Helix and those like them. The standoff stretched, tense seconds ticking by as Volkov's gaze darted between Marcus and the exits. The Chancellor struggled in her grip, fear evident in his eyes. Let him go, Marcus urged. There's still a way out for you. For a moment, it seemed she might consider it. Then her expression hardened, and she shifted her weapon toward the princess, who stood exposed several meters away. Marcus didn't hesitate. He fired, the shot catching Volkov directly between the eyes. She crumpled, the Chancellor stumbling free as guards rushed to secure him. In the aftermath, as medical teams attended to the wounded, Marcus found himself beside the princess in a quiet corner of the pavilion. You saved both our worlds today, she said softly. Marcus shook his head. I just eliminated a threat. You're the one who will save our worlds, with this treaty, with your vision. And what of the man who made it possible? What future does he see for himself? Marcus had never allowed himself to consider a future beyond the next contract, the next target. I don't know, he admitted. There's no going back to who I was. Perhaps, she suggested, her hand finding his, you could stay. As an advisor on human affairs. As a bridge between our peoples. Her eyes held something that transcended diplomatic necessity, something personal, powerful. Marcus looked out at the pavilion where humans and Veldari were already working together to restore order, to salvage the ceremony that would unite their civilizations. For the first time in his life, he glimpsed a purpose beyond destruction, a chance to build something lasting. I'd like that, he said finally. As they walked together toward the waiting officials, Marcus felt the weight of his past receding. He had come to Nolera as death's emissary but would remain as life's defender. The contract that had brought him across the stars remained unfulfilled, yet he had never felt more complete. The assassin had found his final choice, and with it, redemption.